This video essay will compare Michelangelo Antonioni's 1962 Italian film L'Eclisse and Whit Stillman's 1990 American film Metropolitan. Despite the film's differences in location and release year, they are quite similar in their economic, historical, and social contexts. Both Italy and the United States experienced steady economic growth in the lead-up to the film's releases, ushering in new eras defined more by prosperity than war. After decades of fascism, 1962 Italy was in a radically different place. Though nuclear anxiety lingered, this analysis will focus elsewhere. Similarly, in 1990, the United States had moved past national resistance to the Vietnam War into an era of hope. The Cold War was almost over, and for the first time in decades, youth in both countries were free from the shadow of war. The two films' greatest similarity, and the one most crucial to this analysis, is that both movies depict upper-class communities. More specifically, both tell stories about young urban elites that exude ennui. Aimlessness manifests in the listless rhythms of young urban life, marked by fleeting relationships, emotionally vacant workspaces, and, of course, debutante parties. Here the question of this analysis arises. How do L'Eclisse and Metropolitan use film form to either affirm or critique upper-class ideology, and how does each film position the viewer within this critique? I want to make a careful distinction before diving in. Both works tap into Marxist ideas like class consciousness, and the anxiety that comes with navigating social status. The first part of this video essay will focus on how these themes are evoked and explored through film form, especially focusing on the question of, do these films naturalize ideology or reveal it? However, Marxist theory touches on something deeper, the positioning of the viewer. A fascinating extension of Marxist thought, Marxist film theory, as influenced by thinkers like Eisenstein, Brecht, and Adorno, takes ideas like ideology, alienation, and the culture industry and asks, does the structure of a film encourage passive consumption or active interpretation? The second part of this video essay will focus on how L'Eclisse and Metropolitan position the viewer. L'Eclisse follows Vittoria, played by Monica Vitti, as she ends one romance and finds a new one with Piero, played by Alain Delon. The fear of losing money, of returning to the previously destitute Italy, is pervasive.
Ecco cos'è che fa paura mia madre. La miseria. Questa sì.
Fa paura a tutti.
The characters are decidedly upper class, living in lavish apartments and flitting around in a way that only the wealthy can do. Additionally, one of the primary locations in the film is the trading floor of the stock market. But does the film naturalize or call attention to these capitalist ideas? L'Eclisse portrays capitalist ideology as alienating. We see this through emotional distance, represented visually by the motif of walls and fences. Vittoria's romance with Piero begins in the stock market, whose columns ultimately reveal separation between them. Look at the way fences and windows create physical barriers between our bourgeois lovers. Even when inches away, Vittoria cannot connect with Piero. And when neither character shows up to their final meeting, the camera is obsessed with the modern capitalist forces that drove them apart. In other words, Antonioni's mise-en-scène actively obstructs intimacy. Another way Antonioni pulls the curtain back on capitalist ideology is architecture. Vittoria lives in the EUR district of Rome, an architectural project originally planned for the 1942 World's Fair that later became the city's principal economic district. Its strange, almost sci-fi buildings lurk in the background of frames, indifferent to human-scale emotions, and reveal the impersonality of capitalism. The soundtrack also plays a role in revealing ideology. Michel Chion observes the sort of soundtrack fake-out that happens during the opening credits. He states that the potential presence of this music is evoked at the beginning of the film so that the subsequent actions resonate in its silence. As a result, capitalist ideology is made to feel strange and unfamiliar, unable to hide behind the comfort of music. While L'Eclisse reveals capitalist ideology, Metropolitan naturalizes it. The film follows Town Townsend, a middle-class college student who one night stumbles into the debutante ball scene of Manhattan. Tom is at once at odds with and fascinated by the self-named Sally Fowler Rat Pack, a group of upper-class young adults his age who convene after the debutante balls and converse into the early morning. Marxist themes are abundant throughout.
The term bourgeois has almost always been one of contempt. Yet it is precisely the bourgeoisie which is responsible for nearly everything good which has happened in our civilization over the past 4 centuries.
Tom's class stands out from the rest of the group. represented by his tan raincoat that contrasts with the black winter coats of his upper-class friends and pops out of the New York City night.
This is actually very warm. It has a lining.
Additionally, the Sally Fowler Rat Pack displays a sort of class consciousness, defining their niche as the urban haute bourgeoisie, which is largely characterized by their class anxiety. The film goes past just portraying Marxist ideas and also naturalizes capitalist ideology. Looking at the same film form elements that we did for Leclise, architecture in Metropolitan is warm and inviting. Characters lounge on couches, buildings are a source of joy and conviviality, real meaningful dialogue occurs within them. In contrast to Antonioni, Stillman's mise-en-scène makes space for intimacy. Stillman's Manhattan is also greatly aestheticized. Everything from the font on the title cards, to the film halations, to the upbeat jazz-tinged soundtrack, to the 1970 taxicabs, evokes a silent or not-so-silent nostalgia for a time before the decline of bourgeois life.
Our generation is probably the worst since the Protestant Reformation. It's barbaric.
All of these elements create a film that accepts and embraces capitalist ideology as a natural part of life. But how does form not only engage with Marxist ideas, but shape our response to them? A critical component of Marxist film theory is that films should avoid hypnotizing audiences into a suspension of disbelief, which originates from Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno's ideas of the culture industry from their 1947 book, Dialectic of Enlightenment. In it, they assert that culture has become commodified and manipulative, debarring the spectator from thinking and lulling audiences into passivity. They claim that the culture industry defines its own language positively by means of prohibitions applied to its syntax and vocabulary. For movies, this means that the conventions of film form are defined by the culture industry. Leclise subverts these conventions, not just criticizing ideology through thematic content, but attempting to make the viewer critical and leave space for thought. This is felt most obviously in the film's editing. Antonioni's cuts are disorienting, and possibly teleporting viewers through space and time, like in the sequence where Vittoria and Piero go from the EUR district to a lush field. Viewers must consciously ignore the distractions caused by these editing mismatches in order to follow the narrative. Doodlebaum remarks that from the first cut of the film, conventions of continuity editing are challenged. In this case, Antonioni does not establish the spatial relationship typical of the shot-reverse shot technique, as the characters don't look at each other and aren't seen in the same place. Rifkin and Brunet note that the scene in which Vittoria places objects in a picture frame parallels Antonioni's role as metteur en scène, using the picture frame to call attention to the fact that we are watching a carefully arranged film frame. Antonioni's subversion of conventions and emphasis on his movie as just that, a movie, cement Leclise as a film that enables the viewer to consciously critique the ideologies on screen. By contrast, Metropolitan, by using almost perfect continuity editing and a traditional narrative structure, renders the viewer passive. Stillman uses traditional editing techniques to immerse the viewer in the narrative. While there are occasional blips, sometimes characters seem like they awkwardly pause before they respond.
Well, the rest of the SFRP.
You are the SFRP tonight.
It's much more plausible that this is done to show their youth, and not an invitation for critical thought. Indeed, Stillman is often described as a conservative, and Metropolitan is semi-autobiographical. Additionally, narrative structure and emotional weight promote passive viewership. The viewer is dropped into this super-specific economic niche, and yet the characters are relatable. You settle so easily into the safety of this world, the debutante balls, the after parties, the awkward hookups, that Charlie and Tom's trip to the Hamptons feels massive. This stands in contrast to Leclise's characters that resist emotional attachment, and the film's lack of a traditional narrative. Antonioni starts the story during what would be the denouement of a traditional film and ends it without resolution. To conclude, despite the film's differences in release year and country, both Leclise and Metropolitan use film form to explore Marxist themes of class and its effects on societies and relationships. Antonioni's movie reveals and critiques the underlying capitalist ideology, while Stillman's naturalizes and embraces it. Furthermore, Leclise disrupts film conventions to enable active interpretation, while Metropolitan embraces them, reinforcing the culture industry and passive consumption.